All right. Stop scrolling. Yes, you. Don't pretend you didn't hear that. Scientists went into the lab expecting one clean answer. DNA looked at them and said, "Nah, let me cook." For decades, textbooks told us a neat story. One route, one timeline, one explanation that fits nicely on a classroom chart. Then modern DNA testing showed up and casually flipped the table. Because here's the plot twist. Some Native American DNA carries genetic markers that don't fully line up with what we were taught. Not wrong, just incomplete. And history hates when DNA starts asking questions it can't answer. Imagine opening a history book and DNA taps you on the shoulder like, "Hey, you forgot a few chapters. So let me ask you this. What if Native American origins aren't a straight line, but a crossroads? What if migrations were multiple, overlapping, and way more complicated than the cartoon arrows we grew up with?" And no, this isn't about rewriting history for drama. History already did that on its own. DNA just brought the receipts. Now, before we go any further, if this kind of mind-bending history makes your brain do a little wait, what? Go ahead and tap that subscribe button like it owes you money. Hit the like button so the algorithm knows you enjoy having your worldview gently shaken. And drop a comment if you've ever suspected history class was leaving things out. Oh, and share this video with that friend who always says, "I already know all this." Perfect. This one's for them. Because once DNA starts talking, history doesn't get the final word anymore. All right, let's rewind history for a second. Before DNA started acting brand new, scientists were very confident about one thing. The story went like this. Thousands of years ago, during the last ice age, sea levels dropped. And boom, the Bering Land Bridge appeared, a giant frozen walkway connecting Siberia to North America. No passport, no visa, just vibes and mammoths. According to the long-accepted Bering Land Bridge theory, small groups of humans crossed this land bridge, slowly moved south, and eventually became the ancestors of Native Americans. Simple, clean, textbook approved. So what did scientists expect DNA to show? One main genetic source, one migration wave, one straight family tree. In other words, researchers thought Native American DNA would be genetic. Neat. No surprises. No plot twists. No wait, why is this marker here? Moments. Textbooks predicted DNA would line up perfectly. Asian genetic origins. Clear migration timeline. Minimal variation. Basically, DNA was expected to raise its hand in class and say, "Yes, teacher, the answer is Bering Land Bridge." And for a long time, that theory made sense. It explained tools, ice age timing, and early settlement patterns. Historians loved it because it was easy to draw on a chalkboard. One arrow, one direction, done. But here's the fun part. Science isn't a religion. It's a conversation, and DNA doesn't care how many textbooks have already been printed. So when genetic testing finally got advanced enough to look deeper, scientists leaned in, confident. DNA leaned back and said, "Okay, but what if it wasn't that simple?" And that's where the story starts getting uncomfortable and interesting. Quick check. If you were taught the Bering Land Bridge theory in school, drop it in the comments. And if you're ready to see what DNA actually revealed, stay right here. All right, this is the moment scientists wish DNA had a mute button. Because when the test results came back, the lab got real quiet. Not "oops, we miscalculated" quiet. More like, "Are we sure this machine is working?" Quiet. Remember, researchers were expecting a clean match to East Asia. Simple, predictable, textbook-friendly. DNA looked at the checklist, crumpled it up, and said, "Yeah, about that." Instead of only East Asian genetic links, scientists started seeing markers that didn't belong where they were supposed to be. Tiny genetic signatures pointing outside East Asia, not everywhere, not in everyone, but enough to make experts sit up straight in their chairs. And here's where it gets spicy. Certain Native American tribes showed rare DNA markers that were so uncommon, scientists couldn't just wave them away as lab error. These weren't random glitches. They were consistent, repeated, verified. At that point, DNA wasn't whispering anymore. It was tapping the mic like, "Is this thing on?" Researchers ran the tests again, and again, and again. Same results. That's when science did something powerful and uncomfortable. It admitted the truth, publicly, on record. Some scientists straight up said variations of, "We didn't see this coming." Translation? The old model doesn't explain everything. Now, before anyone jumps to conclusions, no. This didn't erase the Bering Land Bridge, but it did complicate the story. It suggested additional movements, contacts, or migrations that history hasn't fully accounted for yet. So let me ask you, if DNA keeps revealing things we weren't prepared to explain, how many chapters of human history are still missing? Drop a comment. Do you think history textbooks should update faster, or wait until every mystery is solved? And if this surprised you too, hit like, subscribe, and share, because DNA just proved history still has secrets to spill. All right, buckle up, because this is the part where DNA looked at the map, zoomed out, and said, "Yeah, we're not done yet." Just when scientists thought the surprises were over, genetic data started whispering, actually shouting, something unexpected. Certain Native American DNA traces showed faint similarities to populations linked to Africa and Australasia. Cue the collective record scratch. Now, before anyone starts packing bags for a time machine, this didn't mean Native Americans came directly from Africa or Australia. Relax, breathe. We're still friends. What it meant was subtler and way more interesting. Researchers noticed tiny genetic signals that resembled those found in some Australasian populations. Think indigenous Australians and Melanesians. This mysterious signal became known as population Y. Why? Because scientists basically said, "We don't know why this is here." Population Y wasn't everywhere. It showed up in specific Native American groups, especially in parts of South America. Not loud, not obvious. More like DNA leaving a sticky note in the margin saying, "Hey, explain this later." And then came the debates. The debates. Some geneticists said this pointed to very early migrations that happened before the main wave across the Bering Land Bridge. Others argued it could reflect ancient population mixing in Asia long before anyone reached the Americas. In other words, same data, different interpretations. Welcome to science. What everyone agreed on, though, was this. The human story is messier, older, and more interconnected than we once thought. No straight lines, no simple boxes. So let me ask you, if DNA connects continents we never expected, what else in history might be connected to? Drop a comment. Does population Y sound like a missing puzzle piece, or a whole new puzzle? And if your brain just did a little somersault, like, subscribe, and share, because DNA just proved the world has always been more connected than we imagined. All right, detective hats on, because this is where DNA looks at the calendar, squints, and says, "Yeah, this is way older than you think." First, let's clear something up. Not all DNA is created equal. There's modern DNA, you, me, your cousin who still uses Internet Explorer, and then there's ancient DNA, the fragile, dusty genetic leftovers pulled from bones, teeth, and sometimes dirt that's older than most civilizations. Modern DNA tells us who is related to whom today. Ancient DNA tells us when those connections actually started. And when scientists compared the two, the timelines didn't line up neatly at all. Here's the shocker. Some of these unusual genetic markers appear to be thousands of years old, not a few centuries, not maybe after Columbus. We're talking about deep prehistory, before writing, before recorded history, before anyone was keeping receipts. That's how researchers knew these clues couldn't be explained by recent contact. No ships, no colonial mixing, no accidental history plot holes. If these markers were recent, they'd be loud and widespread. Instead, they're quiet, rare, and tucked into specific populations. Exactly what you'd expect from very ancient migrations that happened long before borders or nations existed. Scientists ran timelines like a crime scene reconstruction. They compared mutation rates. They matched ancient samples with modern populations. And every road pointed backward, way backward. So imagine this. People were moving, mixing, and exploring the world long before maps existed, long before anyone agreed on a main route. Human history wasn't a straight line. It was more like a group chat, messy, overlapping, and full of people popping in early. Let me ask you, does it surprise you that humans may have been globally connected earlier than we ever imagined? Drop a comment, hit like, subscribe, and share, because the deeper DNA digs, the older and cooler our story gets. All right. Welcome to the awkward family meeting between history and DNA. Picture this. History is sitting comfortably in an old leather chair, sipping tea, saying, "I've been fine for centuries." DNA bursts through the door, waving spreadsheets like, "Yeah, we need to talk." Here's the problem. History and genetics update at very different speeds. History moves slowly, like edition 6 of the textbook slow. Once a narrative gets printed, taught, and tested, it becomes comfortable. Nobody rushes to rewrite a chapter that's been on exams for 40 years. DNA, on the other hand, zero chill. New data, new tools, new results. Constantly. Every time technology improves, DNA drops another plot twist, like a surprise season finale. That's why genetic evidence makes historians nervous. History loves clean stories. One route, one timeline, one arrow on a map. DNA says, actually, it was multiple routes, overlapping migrations, and some people showing up early without telling anyone. And here's the spicy part. Academic resistance isn't always about truth versus lies. Sometimes it's about reputation. Careers are built on theories. Books are written. Tenure is earned. So when DNA challenges a long-standing idea, it's not just correcting a footnote, it's shaking a whole professional house. That doesn't mean scientists are hiding anything. It means big ideas take time to digest. Extra testing, more peer review, lots of arguing in very polite language. So let me throw this to you. Should history books update as soon as DNA changes the story, or wait until every question is answered? Drop your take in the comments. And if you've ever felt like school history was a little too tidy, hit like, subscribe, and share. Because the real story of humanity was never meant to fit in one chapter. For a long time, we were told a very tidy version of Native American origins. One group, one journey, one icy bridge. The end. Simple, clean, easy to memorize for exams. DNA looked at that story and said, cool. But also, no. What the evidence actually suggests is multiple migration waves, not a single file line of people politely waiting their turn. Different groups, different times, possibly different routes, some arriving thousands of years apart. Think less straight road trip and more group travel chat where people keep joining at random times. And then there's the part that really makes history books sweat. Early ocean crossings. Now, no, this doesn't mean ancient people were booking cruise ships. But humans have always been incredible problem solvers. Simple boats, coastal hopping, island chains, ocean currents. Suddenly, water isn't a wall anymore. It's a road. If people reached Australia tens of thousands of years ago by sea, is it really that wild to imagine early ocean travel elsewhere? This doesn't erase land routes like Beringia. It adds layers. Some people walked. Some followed coastlines. Some may have crossed water earlier than we're comfortable admitting. And here's the biggest takeaway. Human history wasn't isolated. It was interconnected. People moved, mixed, adapted, and explored way more than the stay-in-your-lane version of history ever suggested. So let me ask you, does it make more sense that humanity spread in one neat line, or that curious humans kept finding new ways to move? Drop your thoughts in the comments, like, subscribe, and share. Because the real origin story is bigger, messier, and way more interesting than we were taught. All right. This is where the story stops being just interesting science and starts hitting a little closer to home. Because discoveries like this aren't only about bones, dates, and migration arrows on maps. They're about people. For a long time, history has been written by whoever had the pen and the printing press. That meant some stories got highlighted in bold, while others were erased, simplified, or quietly pushed into footnotes. DNA is doing something wild right now. It's handing the microphone back to voices that were muted. Identity isn't just vibes. It's heritage, memory, and belonging. When DNA reveals unexpected connections, it challenges old narratives that said, your story starts here and nowhere else. For many communities, especially indigenous ones, this matters deeply. It says, your history is older, richer, and more complex than anyone gave you credit for. And here's the beautiful part. DNA doesn't pick favorites. It doesn't care about politics, borders, or who wrote the textbook. It just tells the truth, quietly, patiently, one molecule at a time. Sometimes that truth confirms what oral traditions and cultural memories have said all along. Sometimes it asks new questions we weren't ready for. Now let's talk about the future, because this is not the end of the story. DNA technology is improving fast. Better tools, older samples, deeper timelines. That means more forgotten stories may resurface, connections we haven't even imagined yet. History isn't finished being rewritten. It's still loading. So let me ask you, if science keeps uncovering erased chapters, are we brave enough to read them? Drop a comment. Do discoveries like this change how you think about identity and history? Like, subscribe, and share, because the past isn't dead. It's just been waiting for its voice back. DNA doesn't lie, but wow, does it refuse to keep things simple? We love clean stories, beginnings, middles, endings. A nice straight line we can underline in a textbook and say, yep, that's the answer. DNA looked at that idea and said, I'm not here for your comfort. I'm here for the truth. Every time scientists dig deeper, the past gets messy. More voices, more roots, more wait. How did they get here? Moments, and that should actually excite us. Because if science is still discovering the past, running new tests, unlocking older DNA, rewriting timelines, then maybe history isn't finished yet. So here's the real question I want to leave you with. If we're still uncovering where we came from, how much do we really know? Not just about Native American origins, but about humanity, about migration, about connection, about the stories that never made it into the classroom. Now, real talk. If this video made you pause, rethink, or say, hold on, that actually makes sense, do future you a favor and subscribe. Hit like so the algorithm knows you enjoy having your worldview gently shaken. Drop a comment, even if it's just, I read them. And share this with that friend who swears history never changes. Because the past isn't locked. DNA still has the key. And this story, it's far from over.